Welcome everyone to the SDC live stream with Andy Schectman. We are going to be going through many questions from the community and some of the mods as well. Yes, indeed. So I will do our little intro. I'm Dumb Money Media, the king of money, the meme sugar daddy. We have Illuminated Ape here as well, the all-seeing ape. We have Chief Banana Jamma, the meme extraordinaire. And of course, as I said before, we have Andy Schectman, the most beautiful man of 2023 and 2025. Congrats, Andy, on winning these awards. Congrats. Thank you for being here.
Wonder who made those. Who voted in that poll?
All women in the world and half of the men. so,
Wow,
that's a great honor, Andy. That's a great
I'm
honor to
very
have.
honored. I'm honored to be here, and even more honored for that great introduction. I appreciate it very much.
So, Andy, the questions we have from the community, I think one of the questions we have and they have been asking is, why are you here? And what is this announcement you wanted to make to the silver and gold community out there?
Well, look. Why am I here? I think that there's always been a large group the of the population that I think has not really understood what precious metals mean. And I like the fact that you guys are speaking to a younger audience, an audience that understands what's going on, perhaps on a larger scale, on a macro scale with economics. That you are talking to people that are educated, but maybe haven't looked at precious metals the way that I have for the past 30 years. And talking about it not just for a hedge against catastrophe, a hedge against a banking debacle, a hedge against the world reserve standard perhaps fading away or inflation, but looking at it rather as wealth that has, you know, outlived two world wars, German hyperinflation, the Great Depression, everything the world's ever thrown at it. And the most influential people in the world always seem to own gold and silver. To me, it is wealth. And when I started this company as a 19, 20-year-old kid over 30 years ago, there was only one rule that was passed on to me by my father, and that was that I buy something every 2 weeks or he'd fire me. Now, I've owned
Yeah.
the company outright for 2 decades and he's been retired, but I've honored my promise to him. He's not going to fire me anymore. But I continue to buy something every 2 weeks and have for over 30 years because to me it's wealth. And when I was buying this stuff back in the day when nobody wanted it, no one talked about it, to me, it's always been wealth. I was never, ever buying precious metals for the environment that we find ourselves in right now. That is admittingly concerning and frightening, but that's not why I owned it. That's not why, what the roots of my belief. So, look, I'm happy to be here and talking to you and your audience, and hopefully can shed some light on what precious metals mean to a segment of the population that already understands there's a problem, but maybe needs to broaden the way that they look at gold and silver rather than as an investment, something a little deeper than that.
I totally agree with that. I think Illuminated Ape can elaborate on that as well. Uh,
Yeah, absolutely. And I just a follow-up question to that. So since you buy every 2 weeks, do you have like a preference in what you buy? Is it you do it for stacking the weight, or you doing it for just buying pretty things? So what's your preference?
Yeah, I don't typically buy them just because they're pretty. I mean, I've done that along the way. Certainly, 30 plus years allows you a lot of opportunities. But for me, I've just bought it because I look at it as wealth. Most of what I own would be pre 1933 $20 gold pieces, $10 gold pieces, American gold eagles and buffaloes, silver eagles, as being one of only 27 authorized resellers for the mint. We were nominated by Prudential Beige about 15, almost 20 years ago. And it's a great honor. And I've always had a preference for U.S. mint product. Now, ironically, as everyone knows, the Silver Eagle over the last 3 years
Creeping
has
really high.
become irrationally overpriced.
Mhm.
So I've been buying kilo silver bars, 10-ounce silver bars. It is always typically something that is rooted in liquidity and demand. You can have the coolest thing in the world, but if it lacks liquidity and demand, then it is a compromising asset. And I think it's important to own things that in a pinch people would want. For me, it's always been US, Canadian, Australian mint products and or South African. And it served me well so far.
What do you think is like the best value for your buck right now in terms of that kind of easy liquidity?
Well, first of all, I mean, it's impossible to argue against silver as perhaps the most undervalued asset on the planet for many, many reasons. It's depleting in nature in terms of its geological footprint. It's an anomaly in terms of its relationship, not only geologically, but also historically priced against gold. It has an expansion in uses. Everyone talks about solar panels and electric vehicles with batteries, but it's also used in warfare. 500 ounces, almost to the drop in the tip of every Tomahawk cruise missile. It has a massive expansion in digital and green applications, but it's experienced really over the last 3+ years a renaissance in its monetary demand. And when you realize that there are very few commodities that offer duality the way that silver does, when you realize that it is depleting in nature, only 35% roughly of the 1 billion ounces that were mined last year roughly came from companies that mined silver. The rest was byproduct mining. So it's becoming harder and harder and harder to find. It's found in nature in a form called epithermal, which is very near the surface. The big deposits were found decades ago. And so when you talk about what silver truly represents, if you were to take the overt suppression and manipulation of the silver market off of Comex, price would be many times higher. And if you took the price of gold, just call it roughly 2,000 and divide by 7, you're what, 230, 240, something like that. That's the geologic ratio right now. It is coming out of the ground at 7 to 1, but for 5,000 years, it was 16 to 1. So it's depleting in nature. It's growing in its applications, both in terms of its industrial uses and also its monetary demand. And then you take a step back and look what's happening on the exchanges. Last week, we saw the largest one-day delivery off of the Shanghai Gold Exchange since they started trading silver on it. We are seeing the inventories at the London Metals Exchange and the Comex being bled down to record low levels. In fact, I think we've only been lower maybe one time on Comex. We're under 30, what is it? It's 28 million ounces, I want to say. I think that's right. 28 million ounces right now. We've only been lower than that maybe one time. And when you realize we've seen almost, I don't know, over 120, 30 million ounces taken off of the Comex in the last year and a half, it's a methodical draining of the exchanges. And what that says to me, you guys, is that the most wealthy, well-funded investors in the world are draining the exchanges, but I would add to that sophisticated, because it is not easy to pull this kind of volume off of the world's largest exchanges. And then once you do that, you've lost your industrial liquidity. In other words, if you have bars in Comex and Elon Musk says, I'll pay a $50 premium for every ounce of silver sold, if anyone wants to trade me or sell me their 1,000-ounce bars, bang, it's really easy to transfer it. But once you pull that off of the exchange and actually deliver it off of the chain of custody in these exchanges, to reintroduce it would become very costly, not only in shipping it, but having it assayed and the time constraints. And you've lost all liquidity whatsoever in terms of industrial, and it's a one-way ticket. When they are draining these exchanges, to me, they're closest to the information. They're not only sophisticated and have big money, they know the playbook. And by draining the LBMA, by draining the Comex, and they truly are, this is not up for debate. It's happening. And when you see the amount of metal being backdoored out of SLV and the largest one-day delivery off of the Shanghai Gold Exchange, this is just emblematic of what we've been seeing the last few years, where I think the most sophisticated money in the world understands where silver will ultimately be. And if it weren't for one or two incredibly large, stupid as a mud wall short positions on Comex, arguably Bank of America, and I don't know who the other one is, maybe BlackRock, who just took a massive position in PSLV, by the way, huge, maybe the largest position of any, just about any.
It's a concerning position to take because of the
Excuse me?
company. It's a concerning position because of the company itself that's taking it.
Right, of course it is, absolutely. Um, and maybe it's also, I mean, I don't think they would need to take position in the Sprotty Silver Trust in order to suppress the price, but maybe it's indicative of where they actually see things going. One of the benefits of that trust is the ability to distribute it. And for a company like BlackRock, that would be a very easy way to do it, because the delivery mechanism, if I'm not mistaken, is 10 1,000-ounce silver bars. So
that is correct.
Right. And so, for you and me, it's a real pain in the ass to try to have the postman bring you, 700 pounds of silver in 7 boxes. Whereas if you're BlackRock, I'm sure you have lots of places that you could deliver it to. So is it concerning, or is it foreshadowing? And, how many people outside this community really even know that that's what BlackRock did? And so, again, it's front running, and is a common theme that I've seen around the world as it pertains to precious metals by these very sophisticated investors. So to me, silver is the most undervalued asset in the world, and what product you choose from there is up to you. But if I'm looking for value, it's found in silver.
I got a selfish question to ask Andy. After talking about the Comex numbers, I always like wonder what what are the levels that you think they need to drop down to before it's literally like code red, and like it's the most what number would worry you the most?
Well, we're almost there right now. I mean, a few weeks ago, or last week before I did a couple podcasts, I looked at the eligible versus the registered, and they're just the commercial banks alone held 9,000 short contracts, but there were only 6,000 contracts in the registered category. In other words, there were 2/3 more contracts than there were bars. And so if the people who took the other side of those trades said, we want to stand for delivery, you have a big problem. And so you could argue we're pretty dang close to that level right now, where the bleed down in the registered category, it has been epic, slow enough whereas to be methodical, to not wake up the general public. But if you look at a graph, I mean, I think we've lost somewhere in the neighborhood of 120 or 30 million ounces out of there. I think that's about right. I think
we're definitely at an all-time low right now.
Yeah, I think there's been one time lower, and but we're close. The bottom line is that someone is draining the exchanges and using the price suppression to run cover for it.
Well, absolutely. Now, I have just a curiosity question. Now, earlier you mentioned that Tomahawk missiles have, about 500 ounces of silver in them. I've heard the statistic before. Did you ever know where it came from, and whether there's other missile types that maybe use more or less the silver?
No, I haven't. I haven't, and I've thought about that. I'm glad you have. I mean, I've thought about it. I would have just assumed that the majority of them do in the guidance system. No, I don't know where it comes from. I'm assuming they buy it in the open market, and I don't know. But I did Google one time how much silver is in the tip of a Tomahawk cruise missile. In fact, let me do it right now and see what it says. Let's see.
I'm just curious if actually how much military application does silver actually have, in terms of a whole arsenal. I'm thinking back a couple months ago, we're giving away pretty much a large portion of our arsenal we're going to have to our re-up our supply, presumably. And that's another instance, I think, where a lot of silver could be pulled off the market. Another aspect of that, if we do get to a point where it is completely getting to that drain point, like you're saying, most of the silver on the surface level is gone, they can't source it. What is the military or any government's going to do if they really do need the silver for their arsenal? Is it going to lead to a nationalization because of that?
Yeah, well, that's a problem. And I just Googled it. It does say each Tomahawk missile contains 16 kilograms of silver, which is more than 500 ounces. And
Oh.
then one of the one of the articles that pops up from 2014, $251 million Tomahawk cruise missile contract will require silver. So yeah, I mean, look, these are maybe this is why we're seeing the U.S. Mint only make 900,000 silver eagles a month when they have the capacity to make 4 or 5 times that. Maybe the U.S. realizes that silver is a strategic metal more than it is an industrial metal, and they have exhausted their strategic stockpile a long time ago. Maybe this is why it's becoming so hard to find here. Maybe that's why all the people who cover Comex speak of a massive wholesale shortage, because the big money, maybe that's who's draining the exchange.
The big industrial complex of some kind. It does seem
Exactly.
like they would need this.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh,
Well, there's no seam about it. They do. And so, I think one of the mistakes people make is to think everything is as straightforward as your eyes see it. I mean, there's an awful lot of misdirection going on out there in rhetoric and in price. And if the price of gold and silver were indicative of their value, then who the hell's draining all the metal? Why did the central banks buy more gold in the last 18 months than at any time in history? And they
well,
use price and rhetoric to suppress and to misdirect the public. And I think that's kind of what's going on here right now. To be honest with you, I think that price is the greatest tool of misdirection, but the draining of the exchanges and the accumulation by the central banks kind of betray that. Sorry, I'm dealing with
well,
some wicked Florida allergies that I've been dealing with here. But
Oh man, it's okay.
yeah, anyways, my eyes will water a little bit, but it's all good. No, I think silver is the most undervalued asset on the planet, and for my money, that's where I would be. Any extra money that I had, that's where it would go, not as an investment, but as wealth. And what can you buy that is half of what it cost in 1980? Not a whole hell of a lot.
Yeah, that is. I mean, nothing besides.
Right. Well, and not only that, an asset that is expanding in its uses. It's quite shocking actually that the price suppression hasn't garnered more attention from the mainstream.
I always tell
well,
my waifu like in like
hmm,
5 to I'm always like 5 2030. I'm like, all right, well, if Klaus is saying 2030, whatever, it's probably 2030. But I'm like, just wait. You're gonna see when you go to the mall, when you go buy a car, when you go to buy anything that's electronic, they're gonna have a little drop-off box right next to every cash register, and they're gonna say, "We'll buy your silver and give you like a huge discount, maybe even a premium if you're bringing in silver, and we'll give you a discount on whatever this product is that you're buying." Kind of like the way people exchange their old iPhones right now for
Now that's not so stupid, really, because you got half a dozen or 12 states, that a dozen states, I don't know, a lot, that have already passed legislation to allow gold and silver to be legal tender, not only to be held in the treasuries of these states, but to be used as legal tender for all debts, public and private. And when you see the representative from Idaho standing on the legislature floor saying we need to let our constituents do what the central banks are doing to get out of the way of the policy of the Fed, I think it's great to know there are people out there that see this clearly. Folks in Texas, Wyoming, Alaska, Oklahoma, Missouri, Kansas. These states are waking up to not only what gold and silver are in terms of like Aristotle's eight characteristics, I think it is eight of money, and it is money. They are money, but to understand more importantly that what the Federal Reserve and the U.S. government is doing and the trouble that we find ourselves in. You know, everyone talks about this $32 trillion debt, and you know, people don't quite get how big a trillion is. A trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago. Um, but that ignores Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, and government military pensions, which exceed 130 trillion in and of themselves, which are off balance sheet, yet they're obligations we've made to the U.S. public. And so you put it together, we're nearly $200 trillion in debt. How do you pay that off? It's
You
inflation.
don't.
Inflation is here. It's either inflate or default. That's right. And that's one
But
reason
we
that
don't even
I'm
we
sorry.
don't even have a debt ceiling anymore. It's just like I equivalent this to like a company, so general company that is going bankrupt. The first thing or one sleazy things that these companies do is max out their credit cards before they have to, call in and say, okay, we're totally broke now. Just maximizes, their ability to extract value before it all goes away. I think that's exactly sort of what the U.S. government is doing right now with that lack of debt ceiling and no limit. They're just trying to get as much out of the system as they can before it all kaput. What do you think
Look
about that?
at look at Biden, two of Biden's chief economic advisors, right? One of them is named Lael Brainerd. Lael
Yeah.
Brainerd spent time at the Treasury, then at the Fed, and now she's a one of his main economic advisors. Her whole thesis is central bank digital currency, modern monetary theory, and get rid of all the banks. Well, to get rid of the banks, you start by blowing up the regional banks. And you know what's happening right now, especially with this debt bill. $1 trillion in new short-term bonds are going to come out, which is just going to suck more and more and more money out of these banks that already have virtually nothing in the way of reserves. And as people chase yield and pull money out of the banks, you will see a cascade of bank foreclosures and consolidation into these big commercial banks, which, by the way, have seen more money outflow out of those banks than in history. And so the Fed is aiding and abetting the destruction of the banking system by keeping rates up where they are and allowing the money markets to invest in the overnight reverse repo market, which is 5.5% with no risk. The regional banks are dead. Why would anyone keep their money in a regional bank that can be bailed in? You are an unsecured general creditor, and the best you'll get is 4.5% in a 1-year CD, when you can go to Wells Fargo or any of these other commercial banks who have their money in money markets in the reverse repo market, and which is guaranteed by the Fed at 5% with near daily liquidity. No one would. Those banks are dead, and they're going to start to blow up. You have not even begun to see this happen yet. And when you talk about just the top three banks in this country, Goldman, Citi, and JP, the three of them together have 150 trillion in derivatives. 150 trillion. And how long ago was a trillion seconds?
Yeah.
31,688 years ago. Blow up one of those banks, bang, it pulls the whole system down. But have no fear, because Lael Brainerd is here with her central bank digital currency. Sign on the line, will make you whole. Now that's one. How about the other one, Jared Bernstein? Jared Bernstein is his top economic advisor. He just nominated him to be his main thesis. If you Google Jared Bernstein dethroned King Dollar, a report he wrote in 2014, which advocates for the immediate removal of the dollar as the world reserve currency for the distortions, anomalies, trade imbalances, and bubbles it creates. So on one hand, you have one advisor advocating for losing the world reserve status, and think about the weaponizing of the dollar against Russia and all of the fallout that that's had, antagonizing Saudi Arabia, which is the linchpin of our dollar hegemony. Now they are join the BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Belt Road Initiative, the told everyone in Davos they're open to taking other currencies. We're pushing all them away, and everyone thinks they're going to be sanctioned next. So we're doing all we can to lose our world reserve status and to blow up the banks. And his two top advisors, that's their platforms. So from the you can't make it up category, you have to wonder, is all this shit intended? And is this all scripted? And I hope to God
I
I'm
mean,
wrong, but either it's just almost seems too stupid to not be real.
if we use the historic precedent, that usually anytime they bring forth something new and radical, they usually cause the problem or to offer their own solution. Now, this could be very well the same sort of angle here.
That's exactly it. You are causing the problem. But here's the thing. This is the part that I think needs to also be discussed, and that is I think they're looking for a villain. And I say that because when they talked about inflation being Putin's inflation, I said, aha, they're full of shit and they're looking for a villain because if
It's
you've
the blame
studied
game.
Austrian economics for a minute, you understand that inflation is always a monetary event. It is an increase in the money supply. Now, the war did create distortions with price inflation. Okay, I'll buy that, but it wasn't his inflation. It was the fact that the Fed not only suppressed interest rates the way that they did for such a long period of time, but in the last 4 or 5 years created more money and threw it at the country than in the history preceding, or at the world rather. And that those distortions and that money supply injection is what created the inflation. And when they said it was Putin's inflation, I said, no, no, they're looking for a villain. So if you take a step back and look at what we're doing by antagonizing Saudi Arabia, which it is the protection of the Saudi kingdom that gives the dollar its petrodollar world reserve status. And well, Saudi Arabia is now being protected not only by Russia, they've joined BRICS. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization is the largest regional military and financial group in the world, on top of the fact that, you know, they're part of the Belt Road along with all of the OPEC countries. You can see when the switch gets flipped and this de-dollarization that is continuing more and more and more and more and more every day, um, it is going to represent a real problem. And I think that is where you can say, well, it was Xi Jinping and Putin and OPEC, they did this to us. And it allows them to blow this system up and have a villain rather than saying it was the mismanagement of the system and the greed of the system that did this. And so I don't know, it just seems to me all too perfectly set up. And if being the world reserve was so important to this country, you would think they would do all they could to cling to it and to inspire and regain confidence. Instead, it seems everything we're doing, from the way we handle our elections to the way we handle our finances to the way we handle our world affairs, is incentivizing the world to find alternatives to what still is the greatest country in the world, but I think is losing its good graces, shall we say, of its foreign creditors pretty quickly.
Now,
Yeah, it's a real big concern.
from like the central bank's point of view, when we'll get to some more of the other questions that the other guys have, but I always like think I'm like, all right, well, a war with Russia, okay, like we got that now, and Taiwan, that's next, whatever. Maybe North Korea, probably not. But I'm always like, what's gonna make all these central bankers get the balls to say like, let's just create a world currency now, and let's set up this social credit score and let's set up all these things so that we just got one world currency going on. Would it be an alien invasion type thing where they would just make up something
Project
like
Bluebeam.
this? It could be something like that. I don't know. Do you do you ever see the central banks getting so desperate that they're like, all right, well, now we got to all come together. We don't care if we've been blowing each other up the past 100, 2,000 years. It doesn't matter. Let's just make a one world currency at this point and really control shit.
Like dropping the act that they're enemies at all and just actually friends.
Well, I mean, I guess I would normally, my reaction would be never happen, but look at what China's been able to do as the adult in the room. They've mended fences between not only Iran and Iraq, where they just built the first ever railway between the two countries, but China, I mean, excuse me, between Iran and Saudi Arabia. In both cases, you have Sunni and Shiite. They've hated each other for literally centuries, but their enemy's enemy is their friend. And they
Hmm.
realize this is their one opportunity to cooperate and quit, knock the shit off already. And this is a bigger fish to fry, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
This is the opportunity have to break free from the Western suppression and hegemony that is centuries old. And so when you see this, it's certainly these alliances that are being made. It's very difficult to not at least give it credibility. I mean, I just read today that Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. So Iran and Saudi Arabia, okay, hated each other forever.
Yeah.
And the United Arab Emirates and Oman are to form a joint naval force under China's support in line with increasing maritime security in the Persian Gulf. This is just
Fantastic.
right. Just read this today. So these countries are joining together. And when you realize that we've told Saudi Arabia we're going green, and who Saudi Arabia has aligned themselves with, which represents close to 80% of human population. When you put together the Belt Road Initiative, which is over 150 countries, the BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and the Eurasian Economic Union, you're talking the majority of human population. And the BRICS is expanding. 19 countries have either signed on or have expressed interest in signing on, and there's 60 more in the wings. So this is just the very beginning. But these countries, as you can see, are doing things under mutual benefit. Now, China comes into these countries and doesn't use military force or coercion, but they build railways and bridges and maritime channels and ports and oil refineries and gold mines, and they then provide the infrastructure to get it to market and give these countries a hope to have a middle class and a better life. And that's what they're talking about. And whether or not it's pie in the sky or it happens, it just seems to me, to your point, it is happening. Now, could we get involved with that and kumbaya and have a one world type of deal? I don't know. I mean, certainly you can see that we're not invited to this party, but the majority of the population around the globe is. And then you see our friends like France, who seem to be siding with them. Macron just signed a 51-point treaty with China, ranging from 5G technology to military engagement. And to your point on Taiwan, he said, look, we haven't had hardly any impact at all in stopping this war in the Ukraine. What's to think that we would have any significance in getting involved between the US and China over Taiwan? In fact, Macron actually talked about the one China deal and was more or less saying, we're not going to get involved. And they were right there with us in 2022 when we sanctioned Russia, and now all of a sudden they've backed away from that. And he went on to say in this article in Politico, he said, look, it's not just the central banks that are pissed off by the sanctioning of the West, it's the companies in Europe too. A bank in France was sanctioned, fined $4 billion for doing business with the Iranian company. And it's pissing everyone off. And so when you start to see Mexico formally apply to BRICS and France do deals with China in the midst of all of this stuff, it says a whole lot more than just making a deal. It's talking about choosing sides, really. And I think at some point you'll see a lot of these countries like Japan, like Australia, New Zealand. A lot of these countries are actually talking about switching teams, so to speak. So yeah, I don't know if that means we'll be isolated with a few of the other G7 nations, more like a G3 or 4, but I think it's real. And when you take a step back and look at this and say, why are we not only not doing anything about it, we're incentivizing it and increasing the likelihood of it happening? Well, go back to what Klaus Schwab said, this great reset. And if you're going to, in essence, like you said earlier, to have this milk as much as you can out of the system, well, finding a villain makes this whole thing a whole hell of a lot easier. So as they're milking the system and pulling all the metals off the exchanges, making the banks fragile, making the markets fragile, and herding everyone into a handful of commercial banks, yeah, you can see this playing out to where they flip the switch. Saudi Arabia says, hey, thanks for the memories, guys, but we've now
Yeah.
stopped. We're not going to take oil
Right.
dollars for oil anymore. And when that
There's
happens, it's
a
over. Because remember,
yeah,
every
this
country in the world has had own dollars to buy oil for the last 50 years. And if every one of them dumped dollars simultaneously, Mike Adams calls that Operation Sandman. And when that happens, you ain't seen shit yet, because you're talking a tsunami of inflation hitting our shores. And that's when interest rates have to spike. The market will control that. Like, and I'm talking really spike. Because you can't have 25% inflation and 5% interest rates. Your currency becomes toilet paper
Yeah.
quickly. So interest rates have to rise to compensate for that. The only problem with that equation is look at all of the wealth items that are inversely correlated to that. Stocks, bonds, and real estate. Bang, like that. It's over. Saudi Arabia makes that announcement. And look at all of the things they've done, the pieces they've put into place. Join BRICS, all OPEC countries on Belt Road, join Shanghai Cooperation Organization, told everyone at Davos they're open to taking new currencies for oil. We've told them we're going green. They're striking deals with building embassies with Iran. I mean, you can see it's just a matter of time. And there's your great reset. And it was those bastards who did it to us. The dollar gets dumped globally as the world reserve. There's Jared Bernstein there. The banks flow up. There's Lael Brainerd right there. Central bank digital currency, come in, make everyone whole, you reset. Problem is you've now isolated yourself against the rest of the world who is forming a union. And I don't know, they'll let us back in at that point. So there's so much up in
probably
the air,
not
and
with
trying
our
to figure this
government.
out. I would just sum it up this way, guys, by saying either our leaders are completely naive and stupid, or they're very calculated and know exactly what they're doing. And to to the point earlier, yeah, they would be trying to milk as much out of a broken system until that system breaks.
Yeah, it seemingly well is the case. Backing up just a little bit about the consolidation of the regional banks into the bigger banks, I have a concern there, which kind of falls back up to BlackRock or Vanguard or State Street. These three companies seek to have the top ownership of all these five major banks in the United States, probably the global ones. They have stakes in every Fortune 500 company. Now, if it does end up to be the case where everything kind of gets consolidated down to these five banks or three entities which pretty much own the whole market, isn't that just kind of further proof that these three companies probably the more so what we should be focusing on rather than the puppets in charge of government or any kind of institution? It's probably the ones that pay them.
Yeah, of course. I mean, J.P. Morgan right now is larger. I think their balance sheet's like 7 trillion. It's bigger than the People's Bank of China. And when you look at Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan, and the politicians that go in and out, the backdoor deals with the Federal Reserve, the fact that J.P. Morgan pays a $920 million fine for suppressing the metals market, the largest fine at the time the Justice Department ever handed out, and yet they're still allowed to be the administrator of the world's largest silver trust. I mean, that's like a guy getting busted for doing heroin and still being allowed to work at the methadone clinic, and it makes zero
No
sense.
sense.
And
Yes.
but it only goes back to your point. Yes, I mean, if you have to ask it, the question already or the answer. Yes, it is those banks that are pulling the strings. And to the end result, does that mean that a few of them or all of them go bye-bye? I don't know. Goldman Sachs has 57 trillion in derivatives, JP Morgan 51, Citibank like 47. A trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago. These numbers are so big the counterparty's positions are so massive that no one even knows how this all plays out. And if just 1 or 2% of them blow up, the systemic nature of it all, this is why it was so important to have some of these banks taken over, like Credit Suisse. And the rumors are that the banks like Silicon Valley, maybe it wasn't just the fact that the politicians had deposits there. Maybe it was too systemic in terms of their derivative position to pull everyone down. Or I don't know. All I can simply say is it's a mess. And whether it's by design or just we're so far down the road of a bad experiment, you can see it's not going to end well, and there's no way out of it. You're not going to produce yourself out of it by increasing, GDP. We're not going to do that. And so you either print or you default, inflate or die. And that is what people need to understand. The politicians are being applauded that it was so irresponsible to not raise the debt ceiling. How about it's so irresponsible to bankrupt your children and your grandchildren into servitude forever? And that's kind of the road that we find ourselves on. And so when you take the 32 trillion debt out of the equation, the government came out with their balance sheet for 2022 a month ago. Not only is the largest asset in this country student debt, not kidding, that is the largest asset according to the 2022 balance sheet, but they said Social Security is $77 trillion underfunded. And it will be insolvent by 2033. It already is insolvent if it's 77 trillion underfunded.
Only
They've been talking
77.
about that forever. Like my generation wouldn't even get access to it. Anybody that's, Zoomer now, they're paying taxes. It's almost criminal because they're not even going to get any of that money back that they're supposedly paying for their future.
Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about, talking to your generation. And for all the people out there think I talk my book, it's a Sunday afternoon in Florida. My family's out in the pool. I could be out there too. I was doing this in the 90s when nobody wanted gold and silver. Nobody. And, it's something I believe in to my soul, to my core. And so to me, it's pure and simply, it's wealth that has outlived everything the world's ever thrown at it. And I don't think we've seen anything yet. And what really makes me feel that way, you see, most people are stupid and they just look at the price, which is the greatest tool of misdirection. I did a lot of speeches over the years on the book, The Art of War, which speaks all to misdirection, which is mandatory reading at CIA, at West Point. It's taught in most business schools on corporate hierarchy, and law schools on formulating arguments. Bill Belichick uses it to formulate game strategy. The concept of misdirection is incredibly pervasive, and you need to understand that price is being used to misdirect you as the biggest money in the world is truly draining the exchanges to levels that no one's ever seen before. And that's
so they're all trading paper. That's how they're suppressing the price because it's
but
not real.
Yes, but doing it methodically. People would think, why don't they just go buy all the shit? Because if they did that like that, they'd be crowded out of the trade. So instead, they've figured out a way to make it very volatile within a trading range and counterintuitive to macro events. And, when it should be going up, they hit it. And people get very tired of it. But this allows them to continue to suck in the speculators and then smash it and dishearten them, and to continue to do this allows them to methodically drain the exchanges. And there's more and more and more till there's nothing left. And at some point, people will realize that it's a sucker's game. You'd think they would have realized it a long time ago, these managed money traders, but they haven't. They will. But what betrays all of this is the fact that we continue to see drawdown in inventory from the exchanges, that it's being done by the most well-funded and well-informed traders in the world. And they're using this type of plan to, kind of like you said earlier, bleed as much out as they can, not go too fast, and use the price action to keep the general public from even opening the book. No, man. Let me put it this way. I live in a nice golf community here in Southern Florida. The guy who lives across the street from me, is on the Forbes 50 list, one of the biggest money managers in the United States. And there are some others around here, and I golf with them and talk with them, and most of them just talk about how gold and silver hasn't performed in this environment. And I don't go down the road with them. It's not worth my time. Um, and that's the way that the people controlling the price want this to be. Gold is the antithesis of the US dollar, and the people pulling the strings do not, who have been trying to support a bond market for a long time, do not want gold and silver to accentuate themselves. But our adversaries globally are using that against us, and this is how they are draining the world's exchanges, because they know the West playbook and they're doing it themselves. Suppress the paper price, gobble up the physical at subsidized prices, and just print some more damn money to cover your short position. Until the other side of that trade says, no, 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 I don't want paper anymore. I want delivery. And we're getting to that point on these exchanges.
And
Absolutely.
oh no, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask, do you see in a future where if all of this comes to a head, we have a great reset, we have hyperinflation, that precious metals may offer the common person a chance to buy up and create generational wealth in a period where people have no money, they weren't prepared, and they're literally just giving away their properties or their assets for just so that they could have some silver and gold in their pocket in exchange. Do you see that as an opportunity for the common man, maybe to oppose the same sort of scheme that the elite are going to do, which is going to try to be going in there buying up everything, so quote unquote, we won't own anything? Do you see that as being
Yeah, I think he
having
or she who
us have an
loses,
opportunity to shape both that?
I do. I think he or she who loses least in this environment wins. And as sad as it may seem, I think I've always said that there'll be opportunities when the dust settles. And as interest rates rise, you'll see things being valued appropriately in relation to rising interest rates, where things are valued against interest rates at zero at one level, but you make it realistic and put rates at 9 or 10% or something like that, and you'll see real quick what true valuations are when they have to find equilibrium with interest rates. Yeah, there will be really great values, and I think that's part of what I talk about. I mean, I don't own gold just because the sky is falling. I never did. I looked at it as wealth, generational wealth. But yeah, I always thought there would be opportunities along the way too. I mean, it's honestly, you guys, I never spoke this way ever. I gained notoriety because I started talking about the BRICS 3 years ago when no one else did, nobody. But I've never, other than since I realized we're de-dollarizing and things are starting to move in a direction that concerns me as a father of three kids. I my parents were hippies. I grew up when, I never grew up being concerned about anything. And I am very concerned for the first time in my career. For the first time in over 30 years, I talk to people about, yeah, shit's coming. There will be opportunities. But if you are fully invested in dollars, you're destined to go broke. If you are not a
Yeah.
contrarian, you are going to be a victim, period. And that is honest to God how I feel. I hope I'm wrong. Like I said, I got three kids, but unfortunately, you can see if you take a step back objectively, you can see this is the path we're on, and it doesn't end well. It just doesn't.
And that's why I'm happy you've gone over so much of the different geopolitical stuff, the different central bank shit, like because the Zoomers and the Millennials, I would, well, our silver industry Millennials, we pay more attention to this stuff. The Zoomers, they are slightly starting to understand this to some extent, except they're doing it with Bitcoin and gambling essentially. But they understand that there is a a decrease in their purchasing power over time. Like that's kind of been hammered into them through cryptos and different things like that. So they're starting to understand, or they're heading in the right direction, I would say.
Well,
So
I would say, what's the only asset that just about every central bank in the world owns? It's gold and silver.
exactly,
They don't
exactly,
own Bitcoin. Say what you want about it. I'm not a Bitcoin hater at all. I'm a Bitcoin idiot. I don't know much about it. I've yet to meet anyone that can really explain it to me. And even the people who seem to be experts on it have a hard time really conveying it in a way that, a dummy like me can understand. And I understand its principles and what it stands for and its transportability and all of this kind of stuff, but it just escapes me in practical uses, in real time uses. And I think the powers that be, you wonder why 80,000 IRS officials were hired, or auditors or whatever. I think they're looking specifically for the people who have been trading within the ecosystem of cryptocurrencies and going back and forth out of different coins and not recording that. I think
exactly.
that's where people are going to get into some serious trouble. And they look at it as an alternative. I mean, as a competition. Now, again, the bank, Signature Bank, a lot of people think they went after them and let them fail because of their crypto bank that they had, and their crypto platform. If they would have waited one day and said, no, don't worry about it, don't sell your assets, wait one day, we'll buy it all from you at par, we'll give you this loan on this new program we're starting, where right now there's over $90 billion lent out to banks as a lifeline, they wouldn't have failed. But they let them fail because I think that was their way of going after, the crypto industry and FTX and all of these things. I don't think that the government will go by idly allowing Bitcoin to accentuate itself the way most people do. Now, I'm maybe a minority there. I don't know. I don't begrudge anyone for owning it. I think it again, we're all thinking the same way. Question is, do you take the red inner tube or the blue life jacket? Which one works in the end? I don't know. But I'm not a Bitcoin guy, but I don't hate people or think they're stupid for going down that road. I just think there's room in everyone's portfolio, even if you own Bitcoin, for both. One of the ways that I built my metals portfolio early on was with mining shares, where I would buy them, and if they went up by more than 5%, I'd take that 5% out and buy physical metal with it. So you can have both. And so, maybe that's the way people who make money with trading Bitcoin would be able to siphon off profits and put it into real money. I mean, an analogy, when I was early on in my marriage, there was another couple who had kids similar age to mine, good friends of ours to this day, and the guy was all American wrestler, and we would go out, we would go on family vacations. Oftentimes, he and I would end up in a casino, and this guy could drink beer unlike anyone I've ever met in my life. I would end up being stupid, drunk, miserable, and he would be straight as an arrow and always had tons of money in his pocket at the end of the night. And I'm like, how the hell did you do that? I sat at the table with you. You didn't win all the time. I didn't see you win any. Where did all that money come from? In chips. He said, what you didn't notice is after every hand, I put a green chip in my pocket after every time I won. Would never pull it out. And that's the only way you win in anything, is to take profits off the table and to put it into real money. And that's what gold and silver are to me. So if you own Bitcoin, and you make these crazy profits, then don't sell your position. Just trade some of your profit for gold and silver. It's a way to have both, to hedge your bet, and both of them hopefully will serve you well. And if one doesn't, maybe the other one will. And again, it's just, I think there's room in the discussion for both. I own some cryptocurrency because I'm friends with Big Square, and
So
Big
you got theta?
I got
You got
theta.
some theta,
You find
yeah.
theta. Whatever. I don't even look at it. I know it's down. I don't know. He told me to hang on to it, and so I did. I did it
Yeah,
because I trust him, and he's my friend. So
Yeah.
whatever.
yeah.
But here again, I'm not against the idea. It's just that for me, what I know works best, and it's been that way most of my life.
Well, that
Well,
makes total sense. But for me, I can't get into the whole crypto thing. I just don't get why we need a faster transfer system globally when we already have the technology like credit cards. Just back it by gold for silver.
Well, the biggest issue with that would be, and I agree, I think that that is the future. I think that's what the BRICS currency will be. They'll use the technology of the digital yuan and they'll peg gold to it. Um, in that example as well. Who's holding it and auditing it? That's the key.
Exactly.
Where is it? Who's holding it? What? So if you're transparent about the auditing and whatnot, you're right. It is the way to do it. And I think that is the ultimate future. You're right. I mean, I don't know. And I, because it's the decentralization that bothers the government, that if you can't track it, if you have no idea where it's coming from and whatnot, it's too easy to avoid paying your taxes, or things that we're told only criminals hold Bitcoin. That's what they want you to think, but those are the things that they probably don't like too much about it. And anyone that runs competition with the federal government for the creation of money is going to have some issues, I'm sure.
That's
well,
always been historically the case. Yeah. Anytime an alternative comes up, they want to stuff in the butt, which makes it a little bit suspicious to me. So the 2008 financial crisis happens, and then at the wake of the after all that happens, we got Bitcoin to come up on the scene as sort of like, could this be a red herring kind of thing where they knew the system was going to collapse? They wanted some alternate for people to stink their money in if they, like Ross, see something happening early on. This is a scapegoat for them so that they can use it as more time to consolidate their gold and silver holdings for themselves.
And to get, you're
That's a
right,
big
and to
concern of
get
mine.
people, you're right. I believe that it certainly took a lot of competition away from gold and silver, and also to get people familiar with the concept you know, of a cashless society. And I think
Right.
ultimately where we are moving. I think by 2025 or maybe 2026, cash will be a distant memory, if I had to guess.
I agree.
The BIS said by 2025, everyone needs to have a workable central bank digital currency. I went skiing in Beaver Creek this year, and the entire Vail Corporation, one of the biggest corporations in the United States, they don't take cash. And you go to a lot of these places, and cash is already being phased out. I think that's a very big problem. It's something that people should spend more cash, demand more cash, use more cash. I don't know that it will really help ultimately, but you know, the lack of privacy or the ability to alter your finances on the social credit score because went through a red light or you haven't paid your taxes or whatever it may be. All anonymity is gone. Now that's not why the Fed wants it. That's the government likes that for sure, but the Fed wants it because then they can control monetary policy, which right now has to be lent into existence through the banks. And if the banks aren't lending, the regional and commercial banks, then money's not being created. So monetary policy, if you read Lael Brainerd's thesis, is should be able to be done directly from the central bank to the end user rather than the banks lending it into existence. And this is her whole thesis. And ultimately, I think that's what happens. I wish I didn't, because I use cash for just about everything.
Yeah.
But it's probably coming.
Well, my fear is the way I got into gold and silver was the probably how a lot of people after the stimmies came out and COVID happened, because everyone had a bunch of cash, lots of gambling to do. They got to buy the shiny things and stuff. But I lost pretty much my whole investment that I put into different cryptos in 2018 and 2017 and stuff. I I kind of bought at the top and then I sold for like a decent loss of like 40-50%. And then I was like, wow, that sucked. Why did I do that? But what started happening was all the channels that I was looking at, started leading me to channels like where you're talking, where Chris Marcus is talking, and David Morgan and stuff. And I'm like, oh, there's this other thing. I didn't even know about this. What is this and stuff? And then that's how I started learning and watching hundreds of hours now of of videos. And I'm like, there's a play here. Like if someone only has if a Zoomer's in there or a millennial, a younger millennial, and they're looking at everything as just from like a market standpoint. Like they're just like, all right, where are we going to get our next gains at? I mean, there's so many gains that could happen by doing this, but I don't think they understand that the wealth preservation of that side of it. But I think with this next crash, when it does eventually come, we are going to get a influx of very damaged people that have been wrecked from investing in whatever, investing in the stock market, cryptos, and whatever else they're doing. And that's what my hope is that with us existing, that we are there to take up the mantle, kind of how Wall Street Bets did back in the day, and be there as an information source, and to be there
And
as
support group.
and a support group. Yeah, that could well, definitely a support group, and we do have schizoid angst for that.
Yeah.
Our resident mental health advocate. He has his own channel and stuff. But I think we
Well,
could
you know what?
actually
It's
be
it's an
there.
important thing, and you're doing your part, and I agree, and that's why one of the reasons I wanted to come on here with you guys is because there are a lot of people out there that I think need to understand what's coming, and nothing's changed my life quite the way that YouTube has, and I sometimes ask myself, is it worth it putting yourself out there like you do? I don't know. I just feel that this is what I don't know. It's something that is important to me for whatever
Higher
damn
calling.
reason, and I hope people understand or see my sincerity more than anything else. I spend an awful lot of time researching, and but more importantly, I put myself out on a pedestal publicly that is uncomfortable for most people, and even for me when I think about it sometimes. But I think, you know, I look around me and see even people that are incredibly financially savvy, well read, very wealthy, they're just reading the wrong stuff and they are positioned to take a massive fall. Um, and they're some of the hardest people to convince to open their eyes to what's coming. And here again, I just want to, people to, if they take anything away from this interview or this video, it's that why is the biggest money in the world doing this? Why are they draining the exchanges? Why are the central banks buying more gold in the last 18 months than any time ever in history? Why was gold reclassified tier one by the BIS? Why did all the central banks repatriate their gold from the Bank of England and the New York Federal Reserve? And there is something bigger going on here. And the biggest money in the world is also closest to the information. Over my shoulder, you can see a picture of President Roosevelt and the executive order he used to confiscate gold and the gold coin and the $20 gold certificate that were interchangeable. But if one of my best friends down here in Florida is one of the largest importers of numismatic gold coins from Europe. There's a lot of them. Most of what we see that come back to PCGS and NGC for grading have come from central bank safe deposit boxes and holdings. Not only was all debt prior to World War I settled in gold and silver or in gold, but one of the things that in talking with this friend of mine, how he keeps getting these large pools of imported coins, was that the all of Roosevelt's cronies and friends knew that confiscation was coming. And they shipped all of their gold by steamship to safe deposit boxes in Switzerland and got out of harm's way before it happened. And that's kind of what I see right here. the exchanges, which are incredibly sophisticated to bleed down, are being bled down by traders that are getting out of harm's way before the shit hits the fan. And we see that repetitively in finances. Look at the guys from Silicon Valley Bank that sold all their stock leading up to its collapse. The insiders
They
know
knew
the
something.
playbook, and that's
Yep.
what's happening right here. And if you can't see that and are only looking at the price that is counterintuitively designed to fuck you up mentally, then you won't ever. This is why so few people ever really win in investing, because they only jump after the trend has been visually confirmed. You have to trust your gut, the mathematics, the logic, the reasoning, the numbers. And what the biggest money in the world is doing is telegraphing this, even though they're not talking about it. And in fact, the price is not indicative, or the price action. But again, all of this is being betrayed by the acquisition by the biggest money in the world.
And
That's what people got to be paying attention to. Don't look at what the hand is wagging. Look at where the hand's coming from.
Exactly. Any game you've ever played, baseball, football, chess, checkers, any game, the object is to misdirect your opponent. The no-look pass in basketball, the fake handoff this way. It's the fact that there's a play in football called misdirection. Everyone goes this way but one guy. The squeeze bunt in baseball, moving a knight up this way so your queen can flank that way. And chess, everything is about misdirection. And we're being
Everything is
misdirected by the
sleight of
biggest
hand.
money in the world.
It's like a big magic trick, or I guess illusionist trick.
Yeah, it's a game. That's right. And you win by knowing the playbook. And that's exactly why you're seeing these things that seem counterintuitive, but actually are thought out and planned out. You wouldn't see the biggest money in the world doing what they are doing if it weren't important. And I think that's kind of, to me, why I look at these brief pullbacks as a gift, a subsidy. And that's when people say, oh, he's talking his book. There's no way around me being able to be genuine and talk about it without people saying that. We talked a little bit about that offline, but you know, we're going to do close to $1 billion in sales this year. That's not a secret. I don't need to do this. I don't need to get out here and say this stuff. I do it because in my soul, I believe that it's going to happen, and I want to be out there on record saying I tried. Do my part. I go to bed every night feeling good about what I'm doing, and if you don't buy from me, buy from SD Bullion or JM Bullion or ATMEX or anyone. Just get some gold and silver in your possession, period. Hopefully you'll buy from us. I'm doing it for 32 or 3 years without a customer complaint. And we're different. We're a little old school. We do things a little bit different than some of the online companies, but I've been around longer than all of them. And I've been doing this since, long before the internet, my company started. And so I'm happy to be here because of this, because, there were a long time in my career, I never thought I'd be talking to people, 20, 30 years younger than me that had any interest whatsoever. Someone's at my door. Oh, it's just UPS or Amazon. My wife is always ordering. Anyways,
just curious, Andy. Just for a quick interjection, I'm just curious, does your company also so there's a lot of people with 401ks, and I imagine if someone keeps that 401k in the market, in the event that what we're saying does end up coming to fruition and everything's going to crash and reset, they're going to lose all of that. So wouldn't it be better to, bring it over and store it in a vault? Did you offer help in that kind of process for people?
A 401k is different than an IRA. A 401k is a company sponsored plan. And if you aren't working with that company anymore, you want to convert that to a self-directed IRA immediately, whether you buy gold in it or not. But yes, you can convert your existing IRAs, roll them over into one of the handful of custodians around the United States that allow precious metals to be held within the IRA. The one that I like the best, and I have no dog in the fight, but I've worked with them all, and most of them suck. The one that sucks the least is New Direction Trust Company in Louisville, Colorado. Their website is ndtco.com, the acronym for New Direction Trust Co. ndtco.com. You roll over your existing IRA into an IRA with New Direction. You can buy anything you want, from stock to bonds, whatever, but you can also buy physical precious metals. And the cool thing about the precious metals IRA is the distribution feature. So, like for your parents, if your parents, they're 70 years old and they're taking distributions or just about to, you can roll over that IRA, fill it with gold and silver, and then distribute it in kind. In other words, they distribute the metal instead of the money if you want. And you can actually have what's being held for you sent to you as a taxable event, a distribution. Or you wake up one morning, you say, I just don't like what I see coming. Liquidate the whole damn thing. Send me my gold and silver. I'll pay the taxes and the penalties. If you're under 59 and a half, you'd have a 10% penalty. Otherwise, it's income tax. But yes, we do. It's a big part of what we do. And I think the best part about it is being fully aware of the fact that if you desire, you can take possession of the metal being held for you as a distribution or a liquidation.
Yeah, that's actually really important, at least for me. I'm just curious though. You say that you know of all these different companies that do this, and he chose one, but is there a reason why, or a question that you asked these companies that kind of gave you a red flag on not working with them?
It's not as much a red flag as it is the truth of the matter. IRA custodians, these are people that experience lots of turnover. These are people that are dealing mostly customer service and paperwork all day long. And so it doesn't lend itself probably to super high paying jobs, and there's huge turnover. And your client who sends $95,000 in an IRA or 950,000 in an IRA, well, they don't care. They want to know, where is my money, what's going on, where's my paperwork. And so we find that a lot of these companies lack customer service. That's really the biggest issue.
Yeah, it's the worst.
And we've done so much business with New Direction that they've given us personal liaisons, and they're very responsive to our customers and our problems. And to me, that's the biggest issue. They're not holding the metal. Metal's held at a depository. So, maybe the New Directions is in Louisville, Colorado, but the depository you choose is in, Dallas, Texas, or North Dakota, Fargo. So they're just doing all of the paperwork and the filing with the IRS and the record keeping. And if you can't get a hold of someone when you have a problem, then it becomes my problem. And I have found that all of them typically have the same level of complaints or the same issue, and that is lack of customer service. And the ones that, and I'll just say New Direction has been very good at customer service in a field that is filled with custodians that typically aggravate their clients.
That's not a good thing when you're dealing with somebody that holds your well, lack of a better word.
Absolutely.
So I do want to get into now I think this entire interview can be summed up for we had a few questions that did come in for this AMA, and that were criticizing slash trolling to some extent, but they feel that everyone is basically in the silver and gold industry. It's kind of like just crying wolf and stuff. But I think with all the information you just went over right now, that shows it not to be true. It's just
not true.
not.
And it's not. And like I said, I was doing this for 30 years
Exactly.
when gold and silver weren't on anyone's radar. And look, the economic reality of what's happening is real. And are we crying wolf? Maybe sometimes. I am the little boy who cried wolf. I am. I'm okay with that. But I do it for the right reasons. And don't forget, at the end of the book, the wolf comes.
Oh yeah.
So the little boy who cried wolf, if it's being done for the right reason, the little boy was doing it to screw with everyone.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it to screw with anyone. I do it because I believe in my soul it is the right thing to do. And I probably wouldn't feel this way if my dad didn't say in 1989 or 1990, let's start this company together. And I learned from a young kid what gold and silver are, at least what they are to me.
Yeah.
And along the way, I learned just about everything there is to know about this industry because I experienced it, but never talked about gold and silver owning it because the sky's going to fall. And it's not been until just recently that I've been very, very concerned about the future of this country. So, yeah, I can see why people would say that. Me and Peter Schiff and Mike Maloney, everything we talk about is, not really rosy, but there's a fine line between pessimism and realism. And I wish people didn't feel that way. If I got to have a couple of beers at a bar with these people, I guarantee you by the end of the night, they would not feel that way. But I understand, perception is reality. I own a company. Um, it is what it is. I can only tell you it's not true. Hopefully people believe me. Those that do, I will prove that to them. And those that don't, well, maybe they'll have a change of heart somewhere down the road and I'll talk with them and work with them too. And I won't say I told you so, but look, just like a stockbroker only talks about hope spring eternal, there has to be balances here, checks and balances. And I used to be a financial advisor. I understand looking at the whole picture. And I try to be objective. I try to poke holes in what I'm saying. And look, if you can get past the fact that we are a country that is almost $200 trillion in debt, most of it accumulated at the lowest interest rates in human history, a country that its largest single asset, according to the 2022 balance sheet, is student debt, a country that is as divided as we are between red and white and blue and red and blue and black and white and rich and poor and vax and no vax and where you're defined by the person you voted for in the last election and all of these things that are, look, I would never count out America. We come from nothing. My family comes from nothing. My dad's middle name is Miles, and his best friend who lent us $60,000 in 1989, his middle name is Franklin. We started in a one-room office the size of a damn closet. And we come from nothing. My parents were told to file bankruptcy in 1983. And so, people who say that, they don't know me and they don't know that I am the American dream. I'm the embodiment of what this country can do for someone who works hard and does things the right way. I am an optimist. I'm not the little boy who cried wolf normally. In this case, I am because I see it's coming.
Oh yeah.
And I want to tell as many people as I can. And if they believe it, great. If they don't, well, hopefully I'll meet them at a bar one day. We can change that.
Yeah, I think anyone that does have any criticisms and stuff, everyone's going through their own shit. Everyone, they have maybe they bought at the top or something. There's an endless amount of reasons why people criticize for whatever reason and stuff. But if they're still holding it, then obviously they see something. So I'm happy that even though they do have their criticisms of whoever of any of us and stuff, I'm happy they at least still have something in their pockets or in their walls, and they're keeping it safe, and it's gonna protect them, because it's not just about protecting their own wealth. It's kind of like protecting yourself too, and everyone around you, because if everyone around you, I live in this apartment complex. If every single person had, maybe like 50 ounces of silver in just in their collection, just had it, then I would feel a little safer if everything went to shit, because I know everyone around me, now they have purchasing power. The grid's down, okay, something like that. EMP pulse happens, whatever. Now everyone
So would
around
you
me
Yeah.
can.
speak about that, by the way, about this grid is down or EMP pulse, and people say, oh, yeah, bullshit. Well, it's important to understand that 50 US senators have just been given satellite phones just in case a man made or natural disaster or disruptive event occurs and takes out the power grid. And it's
Well,
also important to understand that in an emergency, it takes 50 senators plus the vice president, and that's just enough to carry the majority vote in an emergency situation. So yeah, I mean, is that so out of line to say that? And isn't most people's wealth tied to a digital application, whether it be your online banking, because most people don't keep cash. So I think everyone should have small bills as much as they 5,000, 1,500. I don't care what it is. Fives, tens, and twenties. Nothing bigger than that. Not hundreds. Fives, tens,
Oh
and
yeah.
twenties.
Oh yeah.
And because is it that far out of line to think that that could happen? And if so, then why did they just hand out 50 satellite phones? Why not hand it out to all of the senators and all of the congressmen? But look, I don't know. That's going down a rabbit hole. But yeah, this, and it's unfortunate that people look at gold and silver only as a
Gains.
a bug
Gains.
out, yeah, as a bug out world, like a Walking Dead scenario. Well, I start in 2000, gold was $252 for an 02. It's outperformed everything since then. It's up 900%. It's the tortoise, not the hare, and it slowly moves up and it retains its purchasing power. And before this is all said and done, I swear to God, he or she who loses least will win. And that's what gold and silver will offer you is, protection from that currency chaos that mathematically is all but a certainty.
That's why I'm
dystopian
happy.
reality.
Yeah, this is just reality and I think we're before we get into all the questions that we got, I think when it comes to like the normal person on the street, I would say 90% of people, they're mostly paycheck to paycheck. They're looking at some of them might have, a hundred, maybe like $400 a month where they can invest in stuff. And what would you think if someone is sitting around that $100 to $400 investment? It doesn't need to be. It could be in anything. What order would you say would be a good order for the majority of these people to take in terms of steps of preparedness for any kind of shit that may fucking happen?
I would pay yourself first always, even if it meant 1 ounce of silver. I would pay off all revolving debt, all debt that is um, variable,
Hmm.
credit cards. I would try to live as debt free as possible. I know that it for everyone isn't a reality, but I would do my very best not only to always, no matter what, pay yourself first, buy an ounce or two of silver, or 10, whatever you can afford, and consolidate your debt into something fixed if you can.
Hmm.
Um, and that would be to me in order of importance. Um, but yeah, the only way to ever get off the wheel or to get out of the rat race is to pay yourself first, always. And that's the greatest gift my father ever gave me. Remember, we come from nothing. He gave me nothing but an opportunity and told me he'd fire me if I didn't buy every
Yeah.
2 weeks. And that gift of instilling in me the importance of investing in yourself and letting the laws of compounding work for you instead of against you, in this case, the compounding of time. Um, that's what I would say to people. Look, you buy, like you said, $400 a month. At the end of a year, you got almost 5 grand in silver before its appreciation. And so little by little by little, I mean, you look at an anthill, it's made one little tiny piece of sand at a time. And, you know, sometimes I'll come out to the golf course I live on the next day, and these little industrious red ants, they'll build these little mounds and in a day. And it's crazy. Like, the greens guy comes by and levels them, and there they are again the next day.
Yeah.
It's the craziest thing. And um, but it's little by little by little, and all of a sudden you reach a critical mass. But that's what I would do. I would pay yourself first, and I would get rid of as much as possible all revolving debt, all variable rate debt, or consolidate it. Do the best you can to do that, because that is going to bring people down if we see a really, really big recession, and this massive inversion of the yield curve is telling us there's going to be one hell of a recession, if not a depression, as it almost always portrays exactly that. And this is the most inverted it's ever been. So, yeah, I think that getting your financial house in order, and then also prepare, have food and water and some cash and a gun and you know as
You
crazy
got to
as
have it all.
Recommend
now.
any certain guns? Like, do you want to get an assault rifle? Do you want to just have a pistol?
Well, I think the best home protection gun is a shotgun. A 12 gauge shotgun is
Hmm.
certainly, someone hears that they're going to run.
Oh yeah.
There's a pistol that I love a lot. It's made by Taurus. It's called the Judge, and it shoots 410 shotgun shells and Colt 45 bullets. Look,
Oh,
whatever gun you
Oof.
get, go to the range and be comfortable using it. And that's the most important thing, because you don't want to have something there that will potentially save your family's life that you don't feel really comfortable using.
you can't have
Um,
any hesitation if there's a life and death situation happening.
right.
Yeah.
Channel
So
that you're an
I don't
internal
think,
John Wick.
right. Well, and it's sad we have to feel this way, but here again, preparation. When you buy insurance, you don't come home and say, "Son of a bitch, my house didn't burn down, and I just paid the a
Yeah.
homeowner policy." It's like you have these things in place for the very unlikely event it happens, but you thank God that you were prepared enough, whether it be health insurance, home insurance, or insurance on your family.
No, that makes total sense, and I agree with that as well. The order, I like that order a lot because everyone I deal with that I know personally, I like I said, around like 90% of them, they're in this situation, and they ask me sometimes because they've heard me talk for endless amounts of hours about gold and silver and even crypto to some extent, and they're finally catching on, but it took having to see everything that's happened the past 2.5 years for them to actually be like, oh, like I have to do something now. So that's they kind of needed
Got
it
to
to
break
learn it.
that normalcy bias.
Yeah,
My guess is you're going to see some banks fail in the near future. This new liquidity crisis that we are about to see starting this week, when $1 trillion in treasuries gets unleashed, I think you'll start to see a cascade of bank failures that will freak the hell out of the public.
oh yeah, and it's
And
gonna.
that's
Payments.
when things will start to accelerate. That's when we'll kick it into another gear. And here again, it's almost a mathematical certainty that, you know, the Fed told us there are 722 banks that are technically insolvent. There is a group of bankers that says that number is about almost 4 times that, closer to 3.5 times that, where these banks, if they all of a sudden have to meet a rush of redemptions, they're broke, they're insolvent. And that's why you see $90 billion lent out in this new bank lending program to backstop the banks. But look, FDIC was lent 174 billion by the Fed. FDIC, which had at the end of 2022 128 billion in deposits, backing 18 trillion in or 128 billion in cash assets, backing
Mhm.
18 trillion in bank deposits. And we live in a world where the middle class is being destroyed because of what's happening. The cost of food inflation is the highest it's ever been, ever. And it's going to continue to go higher. And the American people who, the idea for them is to produce more than they consume, save the difference in dollars, but the dollar is being destroyed, which means their wealth is being destroyed. And not only that, just the cost of putting food on the table is getting higher and higher and higher. And you get back to the equation. I don't care if you balance the budget today. How do you pay for nearly 200 trillion in debt? You inflate or you default, period. And so ultimately, they'll do what every government has done since the beginning of time, and that is to choose inflation over austerity, over the tough decisions.
And that's why I'm happy.
Unfortunate reality.
Well, I'm happy that we exist right now, like all of us in this industry, to put out this information because in what, like 5 7 years, all the boomers are going to retire, and all that generational wealth is going to go to their kids, and then the same for the Zoomers and stuff. And I want my our like SDC's mission has always been to get as many of the young people aware of this. Not just because oh it's FOMO, you got to get it. It's no, protect your generational wealth that you're going to receive very soon. The 5 years is nothing. Like 5 years isn't anything. And or
Yeah,
7
this is
years.
cover your ass.
This is cover your ass. It doesn't need to be your, bet you don't have to throw all your money into it, but it's just we exist to try to help make these younger people see this as an option. And
Cover ass insurance.
I think we're going to do good with it. I think we're going to do good with it. And we're going to keep doing what we're doing in order to keep spreading the awareness. And by doing that, I think it's just going to make it less terrible for everyone else around us at the same time. So it makes our lives easier. It makes their lives easier. So overall, it makes everyone's lives a little bit easier. Well, I mean, it's not even an if. It is going to turn to shit. The dollar is going to keep going down in value, even if it doesn't collapse in 5 years or whatever. But we're mitigating the damage, like you
Standing,
said.
imagine Elon Musk standing on a stage saying the goal of Tesla is to lose 2% every year. That's what the Federal Reserve says.
Exactly.
Why they think that 2% inflation should be their target. How about negative 2%? Because the lower the level of inflation, the higher the standard of living. And so, the whole system is just all upside down, and they'll never get back to 2% without radically raising rates. Their rates right now are still below the level that they tell us inflation is at, which excludes food, energy, and housing. And you can't stop inflation unless you have rates above the level of inflation. And so a real negative return on anything fixed income, even at these great returns of 5% on a 6 month or almost 6% on a 6 month treasury. I mean, you're still below the stated rate of inflation, let alone the real rate of inflation, according to Shadow Stats. So inflation is here to stay. Get used to it. This is why you need to protect yourself right now before everyone realizes that, whoa, I need to protect myself.
The first thing I always do when I introduce anyone to well, silver specifically, because I always carry at least like one or two coins in my wallet, is I just show them the purchasing power uh, chart of the dollar, that big ass chart where it's just a straight down and you can't even see it anymore at the bottom, and then they're like, "Whoa, that's crazy," and I'm like, "Yeah, all right," and then I go into a little spiel, and then they kind of understand it a little bit. It puts it in their head at least to possibly research it. And yeah, I think there's easy ways to show people stuff, and I think through making crazy videos like we're going to be making and have been making, and having interviews with amazing guests like you, Andy, beautiful guests like
Appreciate
you.
that, brother. Thank you.
Um, so
Yeah, this is an honor.
I wanna get into our community questions. That we gathered up for this. So we have Sierra Legacy on Twitter. You kind of went over a lot of this already. You don't need to get into like super.
The weeds,
Yeah,
just quick answers.
whatever you want, Andy. I
Yeah.
know the family's at the pool, so I don't want to like take up all your time today and stuff. Because me and Illuminated Ape and Chief, we could sit here for like 8 hours because this is what we do full time. So, um, but Sierra Legacy on Twitter, she was asking about your thoughts on Mexico joining the BRICS. You kind of already went over that, and but specifically, what do you think the price of silver would do in that instance?
I think ultimately, if you look at Peru, I'm going to Google this. I'm almost positive that Peru is on the Belt Road. Hang on. Uh, yes, Peru to join Belt Road Initiative. Yes. Okay. So China's making relationships with countries in all the oil producing countries,
Mm-hmm.
striking deals with all of Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates and Oman, all these countries where they're buying liquid natural gas and oil, and they're buying all the refine or building refineries and future production in Africa and in South America, but they're also getting into bed with the silver producing countries like Mexico and Peru. And you can see what they're doing. They're building infrastructure with real things, with commodities. So the majority of the silver comes from Peru and from Mexico. And so when you see these relationships that are being made, yeah, I think it's very significant. There's no coincidence in the way that they do things. Very well thought out and very calculated. So yeah, I think ultimately silver goes higher than anyone thinks possible, and that's one of the reasons you have Mexico and Peru should be concerning as their alignment with this growing unison of countries.
No, I agree. It's there's so much, man. There's just so much. You have to know an insane amount of basically everything to like connect all these dots so that people can like kind of grasp what is kind of going on. Like, you're getting like with even all the information, like what I mean, is it like 10% of like what's actually going on? Like, who knows? Like, there's so much going on all the
Well,
time, and geopolitics and everything that adds to it. What were you gonna say,
a
I
Aya?
good
mean, there is
indicator.
a very calculated pecking order, I think, of the countries that they're aligning with. And you can see this. You can see it very clearly that the countries that they are aligning themselves with are very rich in commodities, and it will be commodities. And I think commodities and transparency that will really be the focus of this next system. Blockchain technology showing the
Mm-hmm.
immutability of what is pegged or pledged to the system, having it audited the right way, and having the countries that produce all of this stuff on board. I think it's very easy to see if you take a step back.
Aya, did you want
Yeah,
to add to that?
absolutely.
Or
Um, no, that's okay.
okay. Oh, all right. So, well, this is a softball question, I guess, from Sticky the Clown on Twitter. Also, one of our SDC allies. He just wants to know what your favorite sovereign is.
Well, I mean, as a U.S. Mint representative, I've always preferred the American Eagle and Buffalo. I wish it wasn't so expensive to accumulate the silver eagles. The gold eagles, I always keep a silver eagle nearby, and the gold eagles aren't so horrible, or buffaloes. If I'm buying gold, I'm buying the eagle and buffalo. If I'm buying silver right now, probably not the eagle. I would buy the Krugerrand or the Philharmonic or the Britannia or the Kangaroo. Any of
Mm,
those four will give you much better value right now than the eagle will, and or the Maple Leaf, which is a little bit higher than everything else. If you wanted something closer to home, the Maple Leaf isn't ridiculous compared to the other four coins, but the best value right now is probably in the Philharmonic from Austria. You keep seeing right there. That's the gold Philharmonic on our home screen there. So the silver looks exactly the same.
awesome, awesome. Um, we had a question from Satoshi Metals, but you already answered it with the IRA storage system that we talked about, I think 20 minutes ago. But
Mhm.
he did have another question that he added to it. He's just kind of asking, do you think the sovereign coins? What if you had to guess? I think I know the answer, but what direction do you think the premiums are going to go on the sovereign coins in the future? The
Much
next.
higher, much higher. If you look at the legislation in most of these states, some of them say only American made, but most of them say any sovereign mint coin will be allowed to be used as legal tender for all debts, public and private, and they value it on the content of the metal plus any market premium. So these states are saying, any you walk in with the Krugerrand, you're fine. I think a few of them, like Texas, it's only American made, and maybe that's part of the reason it's so hard to find silver eagles. But, anyways, and they say past or present minted foreign, or excuse me, past or present minted sovereign coins will be used for legal tender. So this is one of the big endorsements for buying a coin over a bar at this point.
Nice, nice. Um, Let me see. All right, we did decent additions question, Silver Ducks's question. Let's see. Well, I have one from Armad. I don't want to do that one. um, we kind of we went over a bunch of the derivatives and how they affect the central banks, and that was a question from a Bluff Junkie on our Reddit. So we already have that one. What are your thoughts on? So we kind of went over this too, but the 10 a.m. price of silver, like, why does this keep happening? Why does this keep happening around 10 a.m.? Something always happens on the charts of silver,
It
and
happens usually around 2 a.m. and 10 a.m., which typically coincide with the AM and the PM fix, or close to it. This is when it gets actively traded in New York. They smash it. It gets smashed. Typically, there's a man named Dimitri Speck, and he he's a chartist, and he would take 10 years worth of data and cram it into one chart, and he would show at 2 a.m. and 10 a.m. or thereabouts, the price would get hammered and fall right off a cliff. And this was the culmination of 10 years worth of data into one chart. You can't make that up because this is how they manage the price. Again, remember, gold and silver are the antithesis of the system. So when there's a term in economics called Gibson's paradox, which speaks to the inverse relationship of gold and real interest rates, that is, interest rates after inflation. And so, when for all these years you suppress interest rates, you have to suppress the price of gold and silver. Now, people would say, well, interest rates are rising. Won't that be bad for gold and silver? Well, in the real return, even getting paid 6% on a 6 month treasury, you're moving backwards. Well, the no coupon getting paid on gold sure beats the hell out of the negative return on a fixed income asset. But this time it'll be different because I think that even if rates rise, it's coming as a result of a currency that's dying. And
yeah,
so in normal times, Gibson's paradox would speak to that inverse relationship. But um, look, bottom line is simply this, is that the establishment has done all they can to keep people from realizing that they're involved in a Ponzi scheme, more or less. And although the information is getting out, and it's getting harder and harder to do that, and that's why you see the big money front running by pulling the big amounts off the exchanges. This has been the problem all along. You can only successfully manipulate a market over a period of time by pushing it in the direction that it's going. And it's been easy to do this for a long time when everyone just wanted U.S. based assets and securities, but that's changing now, and it becomes much more difficult to hold back the global tide of realization that gold and silver are real money, and especially when it's our foes that are leading the charge there. So ultimately all this gets exposed, and I don't think they'll be able to continue to hold down the price. And honest to God, I believe we haven't seen anything yet. They'll go higher than anyone thinks possible ultimately.
no, no. I mean, that makes sense. It always does. It always does. Um, the next question I have, we've gone over a lot of these questions already, but just to kind of summarize it from Emotional Union, it looks like they're asking for what percentage of net worth should be allocated to silver and gold. And obviously, that's something that would be that only a financial advisor talking with someone directly could actually do. But what do you think is comfortable? Is it just any amount? Like, just have something, basically. That would
I'd
be my
work your way
answer.
backwards. I mean, I'd work your way backwards. If someone is very financially secure, I'd say, what exposure do you want to a system that is nearly 200 trillion in debt, most of it accumulated at the lowest interest rates in human history, in a country that is antagonizing the country and or organization that makes it the world reserve currency, has weaponized its currency against another country where the rest of the world is moving away from that, is alienating its regional banks, which are responsible for 70% of all the small business loans in this country and 70% or so of all the commercial real estate leases and loans. And the main advisors of the White House are people who are advocating for removal of the world reserve currency and for central bank digital currency removal of all the banks. You take a step back and say, holy shit, I mean, the banks are about ready to all blow up and we're losing our world reserve status. Is this playing out the way they want it to? I don't know. I'd work backwards from there. And then I'd say to myself, well, why are the central banks buying more gold than at any time in human history or any time in civilization since there were central banking? And why did India import 304 million ounces? And why did we see over the last 2 months 230 million ounces of silver delivered off the London Metals Exchange in exchange for physical? And why do we see the registered category at its almost its lowest level ever? And why did we see the biggest one-day distribution of silver off the Shanghai Gold Exchange last week? Why? And
Something going on
from there.
Oh yeah,
We're being misdirected. We're being lied to, and the people who are repositioning sure as hell don't want you to know that gold and silver are pure wealth. They'll let you know that after they've already repositioned, and then if you can find a couple of scraps and help push the price to the moon, that'll be happy. They'll be happy by that. But until they have, as was said earlier at the beginning of this interview, milked as much out of the system as they methodically can, that won't happen. And we'll wake up one day on a Monday morning and Saudi Arabia will have said we are now taking the new BRICS currency, which has just been released, they'll say, and it's pegged to commodities and blah, 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 like they've told us they're going to do. Or maybe, as Alistair McLeod says, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization issue a gold-backed settlement currency for the whole Eurasian continent. That's 60% of, almost 60% of human population right there, the Eurasian, or
yeah.
the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And so all of a sudden, Saudi Arabia dumps dollars for oil settlement, and everything that people understand about reality changes in a matter of seconds when that happens. And this is why that question should be asked backwards. How much gold and silver should you own? No. What exposure do you want to the system? And if your answer is a minute one, then figure out what are your choices, and there aren't very many. And cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, fine, whatever. But again, what is the one asset that all of the central banks are buying? Gold and silver. So to me, more than if I really told you what I believed, I'd lose credibility with most people. Maybe not with your listeners, but a hell of a lot more than the financial advisors would tell you is prudent to own. Diversification is a tool invented out of fiduciary responsibility, or a term, by financial advisors so they don't get sued. Most asset classes do not move in harmony. Some move up, some move down, some move sideways. You become the best of the worst. But what's very scary this time is that for the first time in my career, stocks, bonds, and real estate have lost their inverse correlation to one another. And as rates rise, they all die. And so that's the one thing here, is that if rates rise, a diversified portfolio gets clobbered. And I think rates ultimately will rise as a byproduct of the dollar losing value or demand, or to compensate for the inflation that has to mathematically continue in order to pay all of our obligations, both funded and non-funded.
Well, okay. So the next question would have been is from a big statistician 4024. They're wondering how much longer can the LBMA continue to backstop the Comex's EFP trades for gold and silver?
Not much longer. They're at their lowest levels maybe ever in silver. And I mean, you can look at if you pull up a graph, it's straight down. They're getting very close to it, and the majority of the silver that is there would belong to the ETFs and to bullion vault, and not much longer, I think. And this is what I mean by methodically. This is why they've let it go on so long, so they can methodically drain the exchanges and all the metal that they're able to suck out of the system. it makes it that much more diabolical. While all along the fundamentals scream, this is what you should be doing, their price manipulation misdirects everyone into traditional assets. And um, I don't know. I think we're getting close to that moment on both exchanges, Comex and LBMA.
All right, cool. We got a question from PalMab03, and they're asking, I guess about a month ago, you were on another channel and you mentioned a few 100 million ounces being settled off the COMEX by the EFPs in London. And they kind of wanted to know if you could elaborate on how that actually works when it comes to I guess some of the data that actually comes out from them. Like, is it very accurate? Is it delayed? How does that actually work? Do you?
I mean, I think it's not really delayed. It's a snapshot of what happened. And 2 months in a row, there was almost like 120 and 110 million over the last 2 months, totaling like 230 million ounces. Contracts that are then, instead of taking delivery on Comex where there's not as much silver, they exchange them for delivery in 1,000 ounce bars in the UK. And that's, it's a scheme, it's a scam, and it's not going to last much longer because the silver inventory is. The London Metals Exchange came out recently and said if deliveries off the exchange happen to the extent they did last year, there won't be any silver left for delivery, that the rest of it belongs to other entities and it's not available to be delivered. So it's getting close, but it's just basically taking a large position. And instead of gaining all of the attention that it would by pulling it off of Comex, they send it over to the UK and quietly take it there.
Ah, okay. That actually does make sense. um, we do not have many more questions left. Let's see. From Nshare on Twitter. Uh, he wants to know if you know of any different mints, bullion dealers, and LCSs around the world, what the demand they're seeing is mostly, and have you seen any? I guess like any. Has there been any like scandals when it comes to companies sending out like fakes and or poor quality products that you could think of off the top of your head?
No, I mean, the scandals and the scams in this industry typically center around companies selling modern minted numismatics or proof coins.
Hmm.
And they give, bullshit rationale for it, or even the old numismatics. And they, before you do anything other than straight up bullion, you should understand the industry. And look, it's a federally non-regulated industry. That's why when I moved to Florida 2 years ago, I left my corporate office in Minneapolis. It's the only state in America that regulates what is a federally non-regulated industry. And so we are beholden to the Commissioner of Commerce, and we have surety bond and background checks and continuing education and whatnot that no one else has to do unless they want to be licensed either to sell into or from Minnesota. 99.9% of the companies in America won't do business in the state because of it. It holds us to a higher standard. I'll tell you, I have friends in the UK and Australia that tell me it's just as crazy busy there as it is here. And that's a phenomenon where this is not just and also Canada, by the way, but this is not just North America. This is all around the world is experiencing the same craziness, inflation, war. Um, you know, Everyone experienced the pandemic and the distortions that were created as a result of it, or the government's reaction to it. This is not just people here in the States. This is globally, which makes it that much harder to ultimately compete for a small pool of gold and silver that is being recognized globally. You've got only two major mints in the United States, or in North America, US and Canada. And the other major ones are all across the Atlantic in Australia, Austria, United Kingdom, and South Africa. So yeah, this is ultimately a global phenomenon, and I don't think people quite grasp that. When these six major mints run out of product, it's game over. because
It's
that's
panic.
why they say there's no bull market like a metals bull market. Every other market, and you're motivated by greed. That was the problem that came out of silver squeeze, is that the people who did it, they wanted to get the silver market and the commercial banks the way they did AMC and GameStop. That was the
Mm-hmm.
wrong motivation. You don't buy gold and silver to get wealthy. It is wealth. You may end up becoming wealthy, and if you own enough of it, you will be. But it is wealth. And if you look at it that way, it's much easier to deal with the ups and downs and look at it as a subsidy if you continue to accumulate. But if you're buying it to get rich, you're just going to be disappointed until you wake up one morning and see it higher than you can imagine, which will be something you probably didn't wish for, because it will
Yeah.
come at the expense of everyone around you and the chaos. And going out for a nice dinner and wearing a nice watch or driving a nice car will not have the same um, enjoyment that it maybe did 15, 20 years ago in that environment where gold and silver have gone to the moon. That means the dollar's gotten its ass kicked.
We're pretty
And that
much
comes with its own sense of own set of problems.
we all turn into, if you have 10 ounces of silver and like a gram of gold, you turn into Bruce Wayne's parents at that point, and you're just waiting to get shot by the
And that's not
Joker.
something that any of us should be hoping for.
Exactly.
And because, might be fun for 30 seconds to realize you're worth a lot of money, but then, you know, you go to the store with a gun in your pocket because you're afraid of getting robbed when you get out of your car, only to find nothing there to buy. I mean, I hope it doesn't get that bad. God forbid. But if it ever did get that bad, yeah, this is not something we're all wishing for. But again, this is one of these events where I think we are witnessing a change, changing of the guard, so to speak. And it may not happen this year, may not happen next year, but mathematically, logically, economically, we are reaching the end of this Keynesian experiment where something is going to break, whether it be our economy or the banks or the whole system. There will be something to take its place, and we will rise from the ashes. We're a very industrious people here in the States, but you know, you're going to have to go through. It's like a forest fire, it goes through and cleans out the forest. It's very sad when that happens. You can imagine the animals and the trees and all this stuff that dies. You come back a few years later and it's healthier and more vibrant than ever. We should have let the forest fire burn in '08. The fact that we didn't is only going to make it a much greater disaster. But we'll rise from those ashes too, hopefully at some point. But you want to have any fighting chance at all, not just to survive, maybe even to thrive with opportunities that present themselves. That's what gold and silver will represent, if I'm even a little bit right on what I see coming.
No, and I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be happy that they listen to all of us talk about this for all these so many hours, hundreds and thousands of hours that we've all talked about this, and they're going to be protected. And I think that's when they're going to be, oh, okay, now I actually see what's happening. Like this is really ridiculous, and
But that's
but
why
I
I do
got
what I
something.
do. I mean, you just said it as well as I could ever say it. People say, why do you do this? Well, that's the reason. I don't want to be
What?
as old as saying it's my mission or my calling, because I'm not corny like that, but something in me says this is what I want to do. And so this is what I do. And it's nice to meet people like you that are sounding the alarm to younger people who need to understand this. And I'll say it again, the greatest gift my father ever gave me was telling me how to save every 2 weeks, teaching me how to do that. And because you wake up one day, I still feel like I'm 19, I'm 52. I don't know where the hell time went. And everyone will be there someday, God willing. And it's hard to make up for lost time. So instead, take advantage. There's no time like the present. Little by little by little, you increase your wealth and your dependence on debt, and try to be your own bank, your own insurance company, your own 401k, and you can do that if you're methodical.
Well, that's why I want to thank you, Andy, for talking to us for so long. You gave us a lot of your time already today, and I and not in a complicated way either. You gave all the information out, and I think even the people that aren't uh, involved in business news all day and everything. I think they could understand what you're saying. You're talking in a way that everyone could understand what you're talking about. There might be some acronyms in there that people wouldn't understand, but that's fine. That's fine. The gist of it is you got to protect your wealth and the people you love and the people around you. And I think you conveyed that really well for the people that don't know shit about any of this.
I
you
think
know.
we should do these more often, and maybe even get some live callers or live questions or whatever you'd like. I'm happy to always align myself with people who are doing the right thing, and that's important to me, and I like what you guys are trying to do and getting your message out there to people. So let's do it again sometime, and or more frequently, and see if we can help as many people as possible together.
Hell
See
yeah,
this
man.
thing through.
It's an
That's
admirable goal, and I think we're going to do it.
Right on.
We have to. That's the bottom line. We have to get as silver and gold as many hands as possible. So when things like de-dollarization happens, we have an option instead of just bowing to tyranny.
Couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And I appreciate you guys having me on, and I'll look forward to catching up where we left off, hopefully real soon.
hell yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you so much, Andy, for all your generous time and your beautiful face and seeing you here talking with us. This was the Silver Degen Club. I guess first interview. It could be the first interview that we just had, guys. So thank you for all the community members that came in to watch us. Thank you to Andy Schectman of MilesFranklin.com. Go there now. You must go there now, guys. Everyone. And have an amazing time, everyone.
Stay well, guys.
Yep. Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.
Tis the time to shoot out the elite of society. Thank you to our Patreon supporter. GG Bulon ont tweeté. You have set the standard of true degeneracy and we appreciate your support. Remember, anyone who join our second tier will also have their name social shouted out there. Fantastique.